Wonderful.
Oh, here we are recording. Coaches, in case you're wondering, Ram is not available at the last minute and I'm facilitating today's call. And it's wonderful meeting you all again. And more importantly, I'd like to introduce you to our guest for today, Manisha. Please say hello to Manisha Dahad. Am I saying it right?
Yes, you are. And hello,
Thanks,
everybody.
Manisha.
Lovely to be here with everybody.
Manisha has got an extremely rich profile and portfolio of services and coaching projects, assignments, and leadership stuff that she's busy with. I just read it a few minutes ago, but I read it some time ago, and again to refresh my mind a few minutes ago, and really very impressed with in terms of contributions to the world of people development and social change. You know, you talk about a social agent or a change maker, an innovator of change. I think that those descriptions apply beautifully to Manisha. As part of Manisha's presentation is going to include some of the stuff that she has done, more in-depth into it. And I was just saying to her about an hour ago that she seems to have moved from the field of engineering into development and social change. So we'll pick her brains around topics of interest to us as she presents. So I invite you to ask questions. If Manisha cannot answer it at that moment, she'll let you know and hold it for a bit later. And without further hearing my voice, I'll hand over to Manisha. Welcome to the call, Manisha.
Hi, Cindy. I sometimes seem to be thrown off. I have no idea why, because my internet connection seems strong, but I'll just get started. Can you hear me?
Yes. Where are you? Okay.
There I am, somewhere. All right. So just guide me a little bit because I got thrown off the call a second.
Yes, I was saying, well, welcome to you and handing it over to you. Are you okay, Manisha? Are you thrown off again? Coaches, sorry, just give Manisha a minute, please. There you go. There you are, Manisha.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on. But if I keep getting thrown on, I'll try and come back and keep continuing. Is that okay? That's the best I can do right now.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll just talk about core competencies in the meanwhile.
Between us, we lead this session. I think that's a great idea. With all our connections across the world. Okay, so thank you, Cindy, for the introduction that I didn't get to hear, but I'm sure, you know, it's wonderful to be here and be on this platform and connect to so many amazing, wonderful coaches. I can see some of the faces. So hello, everyone. If you can wave, that's fine too. Wonderful. Great to connect. And today I'm actually going to share about what does it take to coach in the social space or to coach change makers or social leaders, you know, all the various names we use for people who are making a difference in the world. And it's is different. I personally feel that there is a difference between coaching, doing executive coaching and coaching people, doing even life coaching for that matter, to coaching a social change leader. And to give you a sense of why I believe that, I want to just give you a little background on the work that I'm doing. So it'll give you a sense of why we have created a new coaching model for the social space. And obviously it's something that everyone can use and share, but most importantly, I want to identify the areas that we believe coaching is so powerful for change makers, and how is it different in comparison to life coaching or executive coaching. So that'll be what I'm going to be covering today. I'm just going to share my screen because that'll give you a little bit of background. Is that sharing now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm currently heading an organization called GAP, which is Global Action on Poverty. The intention here being that we want to do everything we can possibly to work with change makers. Change makers are individuals that are either an NGO or a charity or a social or running a social enterprise. And we work with them to accelerate their journey so that we can eradicate poverty much sooner from our planet. And I know there's a long way to go, but that's the intention of what GAP stands for. And the reason we went into, so our intention with GAP is to impact 1 million people who are living in poverty by 2020. We're starting with India, but we are already working in other parts of the world. I just wanted to share this is our intention because we want to bring a lot of people along with us to make this happen, and not it being a collective effort rather than just being a couple of individuals running an NGO or making things happen. So GAP was always set up to be a collective movement towards eradicating poverty. And there might be some individuals that are from the GAP community that have joined us here today, because there were many coaches from the Coacharya pool of group that had joined GAP when we initially set up the coaching model and GAP coaching program within GAP. So what is it that we do within GAP? What we do is we know that there are change makers, very passionate, committed people who are making change happen on the ground. And they're doing it in a way that is, many of us may not even go and do it in places or work on issues in such depth and passion compared to what these change makers are doing. And I'm not saying any of us is not a change maker. I'm just saying that the ones that have already initiated this change are so totally passionate and doing amazing work on the ground. And so the way we're working is we're connecting a lot of the resources, knowledge, expertise that already exists, and making that available to our change makers so that they can grow in their capability and their leadership and really evolve their journeys so that poverty can be impacted. So this is what we do very simply. As you can see, we've got 86 coaches from around the world, some from Coacharya, some from ICF, some from other APAC. They've all connected and have become GAP coaches as part of our, and providing support to our change makers, and they're doing it pro bono. We've got around 56 experts, 44 partners, 56 experts and volunteers. So this is a whole community forming to support these change makers that are constantly growing, and they are from other parts of the world. Now, coming into let me just go straight into coaching. And coaching change makers who are so passionate, so dedicated, and have tremendous understanding of what's happening on the ground, have capability to create change, and bring the best of the social world. And we want to bring the best of what coaches can offer to them in terms of focus, clarity, empowerment, and understanding of the inner world that they're playing, because most change makers will be working on what's happening in that community rather than prioritizing themselves. So you can see that self-care comes really at the end for most change makers, and for them to get any kind of support of empowerment from coaches creates a tremendous impact on their journeys. So, when we initially even thought, we hadn't even created any support for change makers, and being a coach myself, I said, coaching will be such a powerful, impactful journey for these change makers to go through, knowing that there was not enough clarity in what they were doing sometimes, or they're doing multiple things because they get so caught up in what's happening in that community. They're addressing an issue to do with water and sanitation. The next thing you know, that the education is a problem, so they have to deal with that. They're dealing with bonded laborers. The next thing they know, they have to deal with, creating employment for people that have just come out of bonded labor in a different way. So there's constant opportunities for change to happen in all these, in every community that a change maker works. So for coaches, sorry, go on.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
But there's a request for you to go into slide mode.
I am in slide mode. It hasn't changed at your end?
We can't see it on the screen. And yes, exactly.
Oh,
and that was
okay. Can you see it right now? Can you see a slide with two blobs and saying coaches and change makers? Can you see that?
Yes, we can see that. It wasn't changing on time, Manisha.
All right. I think what's happening is it's not changing on slide mode, but it'll change when I change it like this. Can you see like this changing?
Yes. Yes, it is now changing.
It's now changing. Okay, so I'll use it in this mode because quite often on Zoom, the slide mode doesn't work on my Mac across different platforms. So let's give this a shot.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was just sharing about how change makers and their world is so different from the world we take so much for granted. And it takes them into so many areas, and having a coach that provides stability, allows them to have a mirror to see what's really going on, getting them to a place of clarity, getting them to understand what's happening inside their inner landscape, in which many have even never looked within, just creates such amazing impact in the change maker's journey. So just to give you an idea, when we did a quick survey to see what added the most impact on their journey, when we had provided networking, learning, experts, coaching was one of the highest, impactful areas for change makers, because that allowed them to have space to look at what they're doing, how they can function better, and how they can become a better leader in that journey. Now, to get to this place of even developing a coaching model for the social space, there were a couple of us, coaches that had to really look at this in a holistic way to say, how is this different from any of our, regular coaching? And what came up is these are the three areas one needs to look at when we are coaching a change maker. One is around personal leadership, and that's something that we all normally coach around anyway, but making sure that this person understands their style and their way of working with the communities that they serve, and requires a very different style of coaching to get to their personal leadership. The other aspect is project effectiveness. So they're all working on different initiatives and lacking in many ways how to manage it in the most effective way. Sometimes the strategies are not clear. Sometimes they're doing, they're too diversified in their areas of focus. Sometimes not even a strategy of creating campaigns is even available, how to even engage with volunteers, or even look at how do I go out there and enroll the community to truly believe that this is required in the community and it is suitable for them. It requires a very different set of skills, which many change makers do not have. And then the non-core activities of an organization, from accounting to legal to anything like that, is always on the back burner because their passion is for the social cause. And that always takes priority to anything else in their organization and gets neglected in many cases. So when we are working with our change makers, even to get them to get ready for funding requires for us to do the planning, look at their funding, look at how they're even creating budgets. All of that, we have to work with them to get them ready to even get to the stage of funding. So just to give you an idea, coaching them to make their organizations effective, their projects effective, is a really key part. And most importantly, being what we would, doing what we are doing with GAP. GAP was there to eradicate poverty, for the people who are living in poverty to come out. So Change Makers was a medium for us to, make that happen, and a very powerful medium. So our intention was not just about let's make this change maker a great leader. which many of us as coaches would find that's an amazing thing to have done. Our intention was we need to make sure people are coming out of poverty as a result of this intervention with our change makers. So we didn't want to stop at just making a change maker a great leader and a great person who can do organization properly. We wanted to make sure that the work that is happening with the change maker is creating social impact. And as a coach, the change maker is being asked to look at their social impact much more deeply. So I'll go into detail with all of these areas. And lastly, in any of these coaching, and I think this is something many of you would be doing anyway, but to create the transformational space that was required for these change makers to truly open up, to go deep, to hold the space and energy that will allow them to emerge powerfully, through these conversations, was a really core part of the work that we're doing. Because these individuals are so purposeful in the work that they're doing that looking at themselves, looking at who they are and what their journeys are and who they can powerfully be is not something that many have even looked at. So that space was really important in our discussions of how we ensure that the coaching sessions are really powerful. So I'll just take you through a couple of thoughts around personal leadership. I know most of you will be very familiar with this, is to really tap into what their vision and passion is and ensure that it's aligned to what they're trying to create in their projects, because quite often we found that the person's dream and their vision and passion was there, but not very aligned with the work that they were creating in the world. So by expanding that, we allowed them to, we could create space for them to get truly aligned with the work that they're doing. The other piece, obviously, that's slightly more distinct when you're looking at leadership development for change makers is there is a lot more collaboration about and bringing people along with them. So, generally leadership styles, obviously, you want people to get along in teams and influence and so on. But in this case, there's a tremendous amount of collaboration required by the change maker to grow as a capability and a capacity in themselves. Compassion to keep expanding. You would assume that somebody who's making social change happen, that they would be, very compassionate, empathize with the issue, and so on. And strangely, we found that the compassion tends to be pretty narrow in a particular aspect of who they are. And the more they understand who they are, that compassion also grows. And as part of this journey as a coach, you notice that their capabilities of compassion, humility, and connection, deeper connection with the community and the issues expand so much more. And their ability to drive change. Quite a few change makers you'll find are wanting to make change happen, but the capacity to really drive it, make it happen on the ground has a spectrum of, their capacity is at a level of spectrum. So some do it well, but in a short spurts. Some do it, some just don't have the capacity. They have the idea, the compassion, but to make it happen on the ground, in a true reality that can have impact on the communities that they're working with, is limited. So these are some qualities we noticed that change makers truly need compared to other areas. And self-awareness and understanding of self is another thing that coaching obviously is what as a coach you're working with all the time. Project effectiveness. Again, I'm not making a distinction here. I'm just saying that we were looking at ensuring that the vision and the alignment of their strategy and the project is really, really important. The first thing we did when we surveyed all our 200 change makers that had worked with us, where coaches had worked with for the last 1 year. And for them, their alignment and clarity of their direction and purpose in connection to who they are became so much more clearer. That was such an added benefit to every change maker when it came to working with a coach. The other piece was to really make sure that their organizational processes were effective. You won't believe the number of conversations I have had and coaches have had to get a change maker to work on their processes to even measure the impact that they're having, to even have accounting processes in place to make sure all the spending that they're doing is accounted for, or even having volunteers that are being managed but not keeping track of who's doing what, where. You know, so much of the processes of running an organizational effectively is missing. And just having a coach work with them, develop that capability has been, you know, a very powerful journey. Social impact. Now, this was the piece where many coaches wanted to grow and sensitize their thinking, was when you're measuring social impact, you'll find a lot of NGOs talking about that they've set up 4 schools, or they've, implemented so many toilets in different villages, or they've done, so those are basically outcomes. And what we want our change makers to think, or coaches to probe further, is to look at the area of impact. Is how is that really translating for the person who's living in poverty, and how has it changed their their living conditions, or their style of working, or the opportunities that have been made available as a result of this, social agenda that has been focused on. So you can see number of children that had clean water was the outcome. So obviously it was made available, but actually measuring the impact, did they attend the school as a result of the water being there? Did they become healthier and not fall ill as a result of having water? Was sometimes not even measured. So as a coach, we have trained and oriented our coaches to make sure that they can probe and ask many more powerful questions in that direction. And to keep exploring social impact in all conversations. So this is at the top level. When we go deeper, so much, so many areas get developed in all of that. The last part of the model that we looked at was around the transformational space. So when any coach is going into a coaching conversation with their change maker, we wanted to shift the ethos, saying that we know something, or we know something more than what a change maker might know, partly because they've come from an NGO background, or may not be very educated, or may, are good at some things, and we know the capabilities are not necessarily as available. There's a whole space that shifts for a coach when they're going into into a coaching conversation with a change maker. And that sense of equality really needs to be brought in, because it's quite quickly, quite often, when you're used to coaching executives, or you're used to coaching people who are already reasonably capable but want clarity, a sense of equality automatically becomes available to you. But when you're coaching people that have come from different backgrounds and also can't afford a lot of things in life, the sense of humility and equality is such a core part of a core quality or a core ability that a coach needs to bring forth. And the sense of service and grace, knowing that you're in service for a larger cause than what you might want to achieve in that specific interaction. There isn't any agenda apart from being in service and letting grace flow through your conversation. And that's the kind of ethos and come from place we orient and develop in the coaches that engage in this space. And obviously the style of engagement this is quite common in both areas. Mindset needs to shift from quite naturally. Many of us, when we are talking to a change maker who's looking at areas that are really, shocking for some of us, when you talk to somebody who's looking at working with sex workers and getting them, looking at girl trafficking and looking at issues, your whole system first goes through an emotional turmoil through all of that. Before you can even connect to them, you can empathize, but to shift them to shift your own energy to a place of being empowered is so important as a coach, because then you're in a space to empower the change maker too. So, and empathizing has to be shifted. One has to, as a coach, address that shift that's going on within yourself and making it available. I mean, I remember I still get connected to these issues quite deeply. So depending on which issue it is, and has a tremendous impact on me, I'm in tears in no time. But also I'm okay to be in tears when I'm doing a coaching session with a change maker. It's perfectly fine, and I connect and I move to a place of empowerment. But that's something that one needs to learn. You can empathize and then take yourself and the change maker to the next level. The other piece around thinking of people being in a scenario of being in a victim stage, especially if they're living, some change makers are living in poverty themselves and still creating change in their communities, and working with limited funds or no funds and still making things happen. There's a tendency we can look at them as being a victim of poverty and treat them differently. And it's important that we get that sense of equality within every human being that we interact with, especially in this space. And to shift from that, at the end of the day, they are an amazing human being with tremendous potential, which I know as coaches we would all connect to, and that there are some circumstances that this individual has gone through, which doesn't mean that we need to be in that space of, looking at them as a victim of a scenario. And so when we are, the other piece is about looking at them from a wholesome place of being the leader and the project and the impact. All of it is happening simultaneously so that you can empower the change maker. You can make sure that the impact that they're having on the ground is powerful through their organization, and that their organization is becoming, effective. So you're always juggling with these three areas, and there's an interplay that happens when you're coaching a change maker through this. And I know I'm talking, so nothing like experiencing a change maker and getting a sense of it, but I haven't, actually I could have done that. I could have asked a change maker to come on board and a coaching could have been done, but that's what we normally do when we work with our coaches. And the other thing we've really introduced and asked many of our coaches to do is to really work with themselves and bring the silence in their own being and make sure that the space is created, that they are empty. It's so important that they're empty from all the struggles and stresses of everyday life, and are available and are there in service of the change maker, and then flowing from there, from a very deep place of being intuitive with what the change maker needs and dancing with that. So this is something we've created with many of our coaches. I wanted to share a short video. I'm hoping you can hear this, so let's see how that goes, with one of our change makers. Her name is Ria. Can you see that?
My name is Ria, and I'm representing Kayakal team, which was selected as one of the gap-intensive change makers.
Cindy, can you hear this?
So I like to say that the gap-intensive program so far
I can hear it, but I suggest that all coaches go off video so we can see it better.
One is to scale the initiative, and the second is to make it more sustainable. So talking about scalability, we've been working since the past 4 years on ground, and although our impact had been really limited. So as the mandate of the intensive program goes, my mentor, Mr. Tarun Jain, and my gap agent, Parul, they've been really supportive in trying to streamline our main vision with our actual work. So I think a lot of brainstorming sessions, weekly calls that we have, and face-to-face meetings that we've done so far have been really helpful in helping us, visualize the way we see Kayakal some years down the line. So far the intensive has been very helpful in helping us just recap and see how we've done our work and how we can take it forward to make a more sustainable impact and a better impact. And secondly, sustainability will come once our vision is in line with what our work is actually, what our work we're doing.
Okay, so that's just to give you one sense. And I'd like to share a video of a coach that has been coaching her as well, so you can see what impact she's had.
It's been a great pleasure to work with Ria. She's very committed to her work. She draws on every resource that's available to her. And she holds herself accountable in a way that made my work very easy. So she's very values and purpose driven. So the first thing we did was to clarify the values and vision that drive her work. She's also very ambitious and wants to do a lot of things. So we looked at identifying her top goals and priorities. So she's extremely committed to impacting more artists. She wants to create content specifically for social good. And she also wants to be sustainable and not be grant driven. So we really looked at different parts of her business model and how they could evolve with this focus in mind. We also worked through the different concerns and fears that might be holding her back, what her patterns are, what kind of leader she is. And I think that's helped her make decisions more confidently and be a more effective leader. So I'm very grateful to Gap for introducing me and connecting me to Ria. Gap is clearly very committed to supporting its change makers, and there's a lot of flexibility around what that support can look like. So that's allowed me to explore where I can make the most impact and what skills I can bring in. And it's been a really fulfilling journey for me. So thank you so much, Gap, and thank you, Ria.
Great. So you can see that, it can be a very fulfilling journey, journey working with a change maker who's making a difference and knowing that you've made a huge difference in their life and that it is impacting people on the ground who can come out of poverty. In our case, it's a higher purpose that we're all working towards rather than just the agenda of growing, for a change maker to grow or for a coach to benefit from that engagement. Both parties are working towards something beyond themselves. So that has a very different pull and ethos with which one works in an engagement. I wanted to share with you some of the areas that I have found, that when you're coaching a social leader, these are some things that really help and support a change maker. So creativity is really, really important for a coach to bring in with a change maker because they're so limited in their resources, the challenges and blocks that keep coming up, whether it's to do with funding or whether it's to do with they're working with the community and suddenly they find that the people that are in their community are suddenly behind bars because of an issue that's happened in the local community and they have to work with that. Or, there are always such scenarios with which, our normal thinking in a business environment or a life environment from the worlds that we come from get really challenged. And the only way we can work with our change maker is to keep thinking, getting them to think creatively of every possible way that they can make this change happen or address or find a solution or really reach out to a wider group of people that they can get support from. So creativity from finding solutions and creativity to expand their thinking of ways in which they can have better impact on the ground is really, really a core part of what a coach would bring to a change maker in this case. I'm hoping I'm making sense. Is that, I know I can keep talking and I don't feel like just talking to slides. So if you've got questions along the way, please do ask. Okay. The next piece is around resilience. The journey of a social leader is a really hard one. They are working in constraints that, that we can't even imagine. They're working in constraints of not having support from the government, sometimes not from the community they're trying to sort out. So imagine, let me give you a name of, we have a change maker called Gitanjali, and she works with people who are in the sex trade in a particular street in Delhi. And her intention is, and even something that the women want, and they call them Didis, they want to come out of that, but don't know. They've been involved in the trade since they were young, trying to get them out of that situation and find alternative employment, and finding everywhere that there is a block when they try and engage with these women, whether it's the police that's colluded with the pimps, or the pimps themselves will try and retaliate, or anything you try and create is, brought down. Imagine the kind of issues you're facing as a change maker when you're addressing social issues that have been created in society. And as a coach, when you stand by next to a change maker like this, and support them to build their own resilience, to not give up, to take care of themselves in that journey as well, because some of them have been burnt out trying to resolve some issues like this, and how to address many of the obstacles to find ways to keep staying on the path despite all the challenges that keep hitting you is a huge focus of a coach. Hence, I feel it's quite distinctly different, because you would have to bring out every possible tool, thinking, compassion, strength, to work alongside a change maker to make sure that they feel empowered and keep building their resilience through this journey. To give you an example of another area is to ensure that they build their capability to stay inspired and find ways to, and have, this is a real distinction of a social leader. In many cases, when you have a leader, you're looking at how they can influence a community or a group of people, how they can inspire them and bring them along. In the social space, inspiring is one thing, but you cannot influence very much the community you're trying to impact. You have to enroll them into your journey with you as a social leader, which requires a very different skill set, and to find the skill set that's appropriate to the style of a change maker, to build their capability to be a great enroller, requires different toolkits to work with. So I'm just highlighting the key areas that, are really different for a change, for a coach. And the biggest piece is, how can you be sensitized to the space if you haven't been exposed to that social space apart from observing it in your society? And in some cases you may have volunteered, or in some cases you may have been actively engaged. How do you sensitize yourself to this? Because trying to even understand what a change maker goes, and for them to open up to you, you have to learn the language of that world. And that's a journey in itself. So becoming familiar with the social space, the issues that are there, the problems that engage, understanding the heart of the change maker from where they're coming from, and connecting with that and being intuitively connected to that. There's a whole range of capabilities you develop as a coach, which you may or may not use on other engagements. So just giving you this landscape of coaching in this leadership, in this kind of social leadership space. That's it. That's all I have to say right now. I'm happy for questions, thoughts, if at all, I'll be happy to address that.
That was a lot, Manisha, meaning the various dynamics there, how you select people in the communities and coaching them to become change makers under good circumstances and difficult ones. Very insightful.
Thank you.
Coaches,
right.
Do you have any questions?
No? Have I just blown everyone into silence, or I haven't made sense? It could be either one of those two things.
No, it was wonderful. Just listening to what's going on there and the depth of the magnitude of how you planned it and the strategizing around it and your insights that you shared. Amazing stuff.
Hi. Manisha, this is Shobha. I have a question. I don't know if it's a question or if it's an observation. So you did speak about the transformational space, and I thought that slide was extremely intuitive. As you rightly pointed out, most of us come from, let's say, the so-called executive space, right? So we work with, we do corporate work, which is an environment which is very sanitized. And increasingly, you work with people now who understand the role of coaching. My question to you, or just, a comment is, to what an extent do the change makers understand the role of the coach? Or is there sometimes a tendency to have a greater expectation, given the fact that they come that many of them come from very difficult situations themselves. So an expectation, almost emotive. That's what I'm trying to imply.
Yeah, yes and no, because if you saw Ria Galecha's video, she's a student, but has passion for social change and created a social enterprise, you know, working with artists in a different part of Delhi, in India. So in some cases, they've come from a similar background and they're making change happen. Some people come from urban backgrounds and want to make that change happen in society. So there's a whole mix. But it's true that the value of coaching is not necessarily understood by anyone, for majority of the people, unless they are in a business world, frankly, in India especially, and in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world, may be different, but in India especially right now, there is still an awareness that needs to be done. But more than that, what we do is the way we've designed it, we get every coach to work with a change maker that comes on board GAP. The moment they've been selected, we get a coach to work with them to work on their plan. And I know this is not leadership coaching necessarily, but it's a lot of coaching for the change maker to really get to engage with a coach. Nothing like experiencing coaching. There's no other way that anybody really understands coaching unless they experience it themselves. And the moment they begin to experience it, they begin to see the value and the connection and the mirroring and the clarity that is being brought by the change maker, and all of those things. And then the engagement begins to start. So now pretty much every change maker that's worked with a coach now wants to do leadership coaching. They want to develop their capabilities as a leader or keep continuing, to understand their inner landscape. So it works. And if the capability is not there for them to be very fluent in a language, or they're not necessarily very educated, the coaching changes. It isn't just pure coaching, it becomes a bit of mentoring, a bit of guidance, a bit of expanding your network to them. So it becomes a combination of things, especially if the change maker is not totally, is not very well educated. Makes a difference. Does that kind of give you some insight?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Hi, this is Smriti here.
Hi, Smriti.
Yeah, thank you, Manisha. That was very insightful. I want to contribute and I want to know how I can do that. How does one get associated with this?
That's beautiful. I can just give you my email and you can just connect. And what we do is we get people on board and we go through an orientation with our coaches to get them sensitized and get familiar with the model. And then you get to coach.
Oh, wonderful. I'd love to do that.
Wonderful. So what I will do is just share my email here. I'm trying to find the Zoom somewhere. Okay, I'll get to it and I'll share it. I think once I stop sharing the video.
Can you just tell it, Manisha? Can you just say it?
Okay.
Or share it in the chat?
Yeah, I'm just doing it here right now. There we go.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. And lovely to have you participate.
Thank you.
Any thoughts, even observations or questions, or, can this really work? Whatever, anything that you might have.
So Manisha, I don't know whether you're aware of this, but ICF Global has this big social goal that in 10 years from now, well now it's 8 years, everybody should experience coaching, irrespective of their economic status.
Exactly.
They can afford it or not, doesn't matter. Everybody should get an experience of coaching. And there's this drive to get coaches who is earning money from coaching to give back by doing some kind of, coach somebody who can't afford it.
Yeah, so true.
And, normally chapter leaders are using International Coaching Week as, go out and coach somebody who has an experience coaching. Yeah. What's wonderful to know is that you have this whole structure in place unfolding, and you seem to be doing it for years now.
No, we haven't. We've just done it for 2 years, so it hasn't been too long.
I think we could just draw on your wisdom and knowledge as to how to unfold this model. My reasoning is that when we work in an executive space, we're very quick to put models and processes in place.
Yeah.
We do it as if it's like normal. And when working in a social space,
yeah,
we neglect that part.
That's so true. That's why when we brought all the models together, I think it made more sense to the coaches than the change makers, frankly. I mean, the change makers were just happy to be coached, but but it helped the coaches to truly understand where they can create impact and not lose sight of the trinity that I'm talking about, you know, the person, the project, as well as the impact that they're trying to create. And that was really powerful shift for many of the coaches, is to make sure that the conversation doesn't get lost, or if they didn't focus on that. Because even though it's a very simplistic model and it can stay in anybody's head, you can obviously adapt it to do what it has to do. But the depth came when each coach delved deeper through our training that we did. Each coach looked at each of these areas in depth, and then the overlaps between each of the areas, and see how do we bring out the maximum impact with a social change leader so that they can be out there in the world much more powerful and get people out of poverty in the journey. So that was the that was needed.
And tracking that maximum impact, you know, how you track it and measure it.
Yes.
That was a big insight. It's so easy to get engaged with the cause of doing it. You know, it's social development. And of course, we're all passionate about it. That we forget, you know, the rest of the tracking and how will this work better. Because the one thing tracking does is an improvement element. What's working, what's not working, and how we can get it better.
True, so true. I was just looking at the chat, Cindy, and there are a couple of questions that are coming up. I think Bhanumati said they would like to volunteer, and how do I get started? So just email me and I'll put you in touch with, we've got a person who's leading that area, and they can really bring you on board. So that'll be fantastic. And Marianne is saying many in social change space do not have much funds. Any creative ways to fund coaching engagement? You mean, okay, so that the coaches can be paid in a subsidized way. Is that what you're trying to say, Marianne, if I'm right in understanding that question? Are you understanding it the same way, Cindy?
Marianne, is that what you're asking? You're asking, she says yes.
Yes, yeah. Okay, great. There can be, we could potentially get other organizations to sponsor this so that coaches can be, you know, supported. And why not? So even if it may be subsidized or whatever it might be, but there might be a room to make this happen so that coaches are really focused as well, and change makers can do that. I just find, though, when we've had coaches do it pro bono, their level of fulfillment and satisfaction to contribute to the cause seems more the agenda rather than worrying about being paid. There was something there that was beautiful in the way they wanted to engage and make something beautiful happen in society. So at this moment, it's pro bono. I would in fact want to spin it and say, if change makers can afford, even if it's a small token amount, I would love for them to put that into the kitty for a coach, not because the value of the coaching engagement is that, but their commitment to coaching changes the moment they have something to pay. And, you know, rather than expecting everything to be free, there's something about the change makers paying something that has more impact than having a coach being sponsored by somebody else. But we could potentially explore that model. We just haven't got to it yet.
Manisha, there's a request for your slides on the chat, and there's another one on share some more about the distinction between being and circumstance.
Yes. So that was connected to, you know, when we look at people who are in dire circumstances, our focus tends to be that we end up finding somewhere, either we connect and we feel a sense of pity that they are in this situation. And more and more, and you end up feeling sorry, or you end up feeling that they don't have enough capacity or capability in that moment, the moment you find that you are treating them as a victim of the situation, but you're feeling sad for them and you pity them, and that whole energy is that you feel that this person doesn't have the capacity to bring themselves out of it. And it may be true to some extent, but as a coach, more so, we want people to connect to the being of that individual, connect to the potential and greatness we know that exists in every human being. And you can see it the moment you come from that lens, and just know that they're in a circumstance where they've just had, it's a shame that they have been given that kind of life right now. But we know the moment you connect with them from a being space, they begin to emerge as a person that has the capability, has the possibility of making a difference to their own life. So, and that's the perspective that we are saying you keep when you're dealing with a change maker and you're dealing with the community that they are engaging with. So from that space is what I was trying to clarify. I hope that makes sense, Aishwarya. And if it doesn't, please, feel free to ask again. What is my personal background for believing in the power of coaching for change makers? Why not mentoring, for example? Good one, Vijaya. No, I started coaching in 2003, so this has been a long time. And I remember the first time I got coached, I saw the power of it in the way it empowered me, made me totally clear about where I needed to go, and got me onto my own internal journey of trying to understand who am I and what am I here to do. And I think the power of coaching to take me there was just tremendous. Obviously, there can be many triggers for people and other experiences. And mentoring at the end of the day is advisory. It's more about the experience of the individual that is mentoring you to share their experience or their advice. But as a coach, when I was coached, I found I got empowered, which I didn't find when I was mentored. So nothing like coaching. That's why when we initially kickstarted GAP, mentoring came later. We had experts to provide mentoring later. We first came with coaching and the power of coaching with our change makers. We knew that would shift the dynamic much, much more powerfully. And imagine empowering somebody, then you don't even need the mentor or anyone to guide you for too long when you've got your internal guidance system activated. So
Manisha,
that's my
Ram wants to know if you welcome coaches in training. Are they welcome on the program?
At this moment, we are taking certified coaches, or at least who finished their certification, purely because we are not in a place to make sure that the coach is also ready and give the social space sensitivity at the same time. So we've taken only certified coaches right now into GAP. But, you're welcome. Just connect with us anyway. And as we are ready, we'll bring you on board. And as you're ready, there's no reason. If you want to make a difference and you want to bring that coaching to a place like this, that's great. Except that we don't want it to be an environment where you get your coaching time as a practice session, because the intent here is to make a difference to the change maker's journey much, much more so than you having your practice necessarily as the agenda. Not that there's anything wrong in that, but in this case, we want to make sure that the impact to the change maker happens straight away. Yeah.
Coaches, did I miss any of your questions? Please copy and paste it back into the chat or ask it.
She wanted to share. My email ID is right above there. I don't know if it's visible for anyone. Somebody wanted it to be shared again. I'll just do it again.
Yeah, I'm looking to copy and paste it.
I've just done it. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's pretty much. I think, how is the outcome of linking poverty eradication to GAP coaching model measured? So, so in many ways, actually, we're finding that through the gap coaching model, we knew that the change makers' personal leadership has expanded, and the work that they're doing in their community has tremendously increased because they've got better clarity. The way they are taking, who they are being in their community has changed and shifted, and they themselves have attributed how coaching has been so powerful in their journey to have impact on their community. So imagine a person who's doing some work in creating solar energy in their community where there's no lighting and electricity available. What is happening is, as a result of the clarity that they're getting through the coaching and the areas where they had fear or obstacles that they hadn't gone forward with, they're beginning to go. They've now got the strength and capability to go into areas that they hadn't gone to before, and then began to serve more people, or the people that they were serving managed to get deeper into the impact that they're creating in that area. So we did actually, at the end of December last year, we did a whole impact survey, and we actually linked how coaching is impacting the change maker to have better impact. And the change maker, he or herself, is attributing that percentage to coaching. That's why we said 80% of them found so much benefit through coaching. And that goes with organizational effectiveness as well, in areas that they didn't have clarity on, even how to create an effective campaign or a marketing strategy if they were a social enterprise, how to connect with networks that they wouldn't have normally connected. All of that became so much more powerful for them and accelerated their journeys. So it's very clear, actually. The coaching model is very clear for us. I hope that answers that question.
There's one more day. Can you tell us something about creating awareness of the need?
Creating awareness of the need aspect.
Yeah.
What does Sanjeev mean? Creating awareness of coaching for change makers? I'm assuming that's what you're asking, Sanjeev? If that is the question, the need for the change. I'm not sure if I'm getting the question right. Cindy, are you getting another version of it?
Then now, if we got the need for the change, can you tell us something about creating awareness for the need for this change? Am I right? Oh, for example, he's giving an example, the need for change in mental health. Right, Sanjeev? Am I saying it right? You want to know more about...
Oh, okay. So what's one of the biggest challenges that we have while coaching such change? Sure. I think the initial challenge we had is for a change maker to even understand the power of coaching. I mean, they viewed coaching as somebody, the only time the word coach was more familiar to them is in sport. You've got a coach to sport, or, so that's an area that they could understand. But trying to look inside yourself is something that takes tremendous courage, for most people, even for ourselves for that matter. So that was a big challenge, is to say, what is the power of coaching and who are you being when you're engaging in life or you're trying to create the impact that you are creating? And how can you grow as a result of that? That was a really, I think that was a challenge. And the only way we could address it was to take them through that journey in some form or another. The other big challenge that we found is, even when we do connect the change maker and a coach together, sometimes the seriousness of coaching and honoring of the coach sometimes lacks in the change maker because they may not truly understand the power of a coach. So the awareness piece has been taking time. So we've done a lot of webinars on coaching. We do a lot of meets between a coach and a change maker. We share stories and videos of what the impact of coaching has been to change makers. So there's a lot of that that we do, and that allows people to, really shift. And I think, Sanjeev, you're talking about attitude and approach towards mental health. So you mean if we address it with the change makers? I'm still not clear. Do you think you could speak, Sanjeev? It might be easier if that's not a problem. I'm not sure if I'm...
Manisha, give me a minute.
Certainly. Thank you.
Coaches,
This is Sanjeev.
Sanjeev, give me a minute. Coaches, before you start dropping off, and I know we're going to be on the hour soon, I need to give you 2 passwords. First one, Manisha. Second one, change maker.
Okay.
Go ahead, Manisha. Sanjeev, go ahead.
Okay, go on, Sanjeev. Lovely to hear from you. I'm assuming it makes sense what you just told all the coaches. It didn't to me. Sanjeev, do you want to come back and ask
Yeah, I'm
question?
here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Manisha. I'm working on mental health, and what the challenges I face at this point in time are even considering that mental health is an issue, or is a challenge in society today. And when I'm talking about mental health, I'm not talking about mental illness.
Yeah, you're just talking about if people, or mental health at one other level, right? Whether it's connected to depression or other areas. Am I right in saying?
Absolutely. Managing stress, making decisions, having effective communicating effectively, having effective relationships.
Sure. So we work with change makers who don't necessarily have that issue, but they are working in areas that in their own communities that impact mental health. So it's difficult for me to address that specific question because the change makers that we have on board in the in our space are individuals who have some capability in making that change happen in their community or society. So I have not necessarily addressed that in the change makers journey, but in terms of change makers who are looking at health in their own initiatives, they face a lot of challenges, there's no question. So they do a lot of work around creating awareness of how this impacts them. I mean, even they're dealing with people who've been involved in domestic violence as a result of not having clear mental stability. They've had people committing suicides. We've had farmers committing suicide because they can't create livelihoods. So mental health, there's such a spectrum. And so they are addressing it, not necessarily using coaching. They're doing their own mechanisms of creating change by creating awareness, providing counseling, and so on. So, and it's a hard journey for them. I would say it's a really hard journey. It's not easy. So if that's something that you're passionate about and you would want to support someone in that space, we could surely look at that. But I'm not saying we've addressed it necessarily.
All right. Thank you.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coaches, we have reached the end of our call. Anybody needs to say anything? Are you all okay to say our goodbyes?
Wonderful. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Manisha, the passwords were for coaches claiming CCU points.
I see. I got it. Okay. Wonderful.
Okay. And just to, Manisha, thank you so much. It was really enlightening. And the work you do is so inspiring. I mean, the way you talk about it, you can just pick up the inspiration and passion in your voice. Wonderful to hear from you today.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure and lovely to know you too, and to connect to all the coaches. So thank you. That's it. Wonderful time. Great. Okay.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Bye.